Hola, chicas. This is your Seasoned Sis with the premiere episode of my podcast. You may have noticed that there is a question mark on my podcast cover. This episode will answer some questions, mainly, who this woman? I'm a single woman over 40 who has never been married. I want to talk about life viewed through a single lens. I'm a daughter, sister, aunt, great auntie, niece, friend, published poet, and retired special educator. What I have never been is a wife. This woman of a certain age believes that life is an adventure worth taking, even if you are a party of one. In my humble opinion, I am qualified to be the one. I know I am not by myself. At 61 years old, I have more seasoning than the single 20, 30, and 40 somethings out there. The boxes I check are legitimate, bona fide church girl. I have credentials if you want to check them. Blackity black with a pinch of radical, pro woman with a dash of feminism, and born at the tail end of the baby boom. Does that make me a boomerette? I am into all things arts, like museums, theater, Broadway, and movie musicals. Yes, I wanted The Color Purple as a musical. Your seasoned sis is fascinated by cults, loves a good crime series, and documentaries about everything under the sun. Why are you doing a podcast, seasoned sis? So glad that you asked. I want to provide a community and voice for single women. The Seasoned Sis podcast is an extension of my blog, areyoutheone.com, and it will provide an opportunity to expand single women's voices beyond print. I spent too many years wishing and hoping and praying for the one. I desperately wanted to add Mrs. to my name. Just because that didn't happen does not mean I am denied a happily ever after. It's up to us to do what it takes to be the one for ourselves and the others in our lives. This podcast is not anti-marriage or anti-man. If marriage is your immediate or future goal, God bless you. God bless you. If you consider yourself single for life, there is a place for you. Who is this podcast for, Season Sis? This podcast is primarily for women over 40 whose current status is single, which means never been married, divorced, or widowed. My aim is to create a community, a safe space where voices can be heard. Younger women and married women are not banned. Just know that your point of view may not be prioritized. We don't require any mansplaining. However, if we want to hear from the tenor, baritone, or bass sections, an invitation may be extended. I desire single women to feel valued no matter their status. No one has the right to make us feel less than whether or not we become or remain a missus. How did this podcast come about? What is the evolution of it? I am going to back map for y'all how this podcast came to be. In 2022, the blog, The One, was launched after a decade-long hiatus from my exclusivity blog. In the early 2000s, I took a communications class where one of the assignments was to create a landing page for a website that I called Solitary Noir. Even though it was never launched, connecting with singles was going to be the theme. Singleness was and still is the thread that is woven through my life. Going way, way back, this memory from my girlhood recently resurfaced. When asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I remember saying that I wanted to be a newscaster. I saw myself sitting behind a desk reporting what was going on locally and in the world. I would present someone who would tell folks about what was happening out there, and then they would send it back to me. I hadn't thought about Marie Tory, the first female anchor woman on one of the three TV stations in Pittsburgh in years. She began anchoring the year I was born, and I was today years old when I realized that she made an imprint on me. At my house, we had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. The reel-to-reel tape recorder was the precursor to the cassette tape, also invented the year I was born. Recording my voice, telling whomever would listen was a thrill back then. I also remember my father handing me the phone so that I could talk to one of the older members of our church who was a mentor to him. He asked me what I wanted to be, and I told him I wanted to be a newscaster. Well, fast forward to being a senior in high school. Communications was not something that I planned to study in college. I never even imagined learning how to do anything in broadcast media, television, let alone radio. It was just not on my mind. I did not consider it as a career. I graduated high school choosing nursing as a major because I felt like it was not legitimate to admit that you did not know what you wanted to do with your life. In hindsight, I wish that I would not have buried the desire to communicate with people. Needless to say, the path that we take in life, my life anyway, isn't always straightforward. A straightforward path was not God's plan for me, and I won't be held hostage by regrets. Things happen for a reason, and sometimes you know the reason, sometimes you don't, and that is okay. I said all that to say that my childhood dream of being a newscaster led me to launching the Seasoned Sis podcast. Someday I may decide to post live and or have a podcast where I will be in front of the camera with myself and guests. So for right now, this podcast is a way to interact and engage with other single women and provide encouragement. One of the reasons that I chose blogging instead of podcasting was because I really did not care for the sound of my voice and I'm not a fan of being on camera. I decided to write it all down, but then realized as a podcast fan myself, listening to podcasts is a more practical way of sharing information. It is portable. You can multitask while taking a walk, doing chores, or running errands. Hands free. Have AirPods will travel, whereas with a blog, you are in a sense held captive to the device you are reading from, which works fine at home or when you are a rider versus a driver. What you gonna talk about, Seasoned Sis? We will dig into posts from my blog, areyoutheone.com, with titles like, That's a No for Me, bruh, Gentrification, For the Love of Leah, American Church Girl Idol, Fairy Tales Ain't Necessarily So, and Suddenly Seymour, Suddenly Single. Sometimes I will put on my poetess Quipet beret and share poems penned by yours truly with titles like We Girls, Know My Brother, and Is You the One. In this ever-changing world, things will come up that need to be discussed, or we may need to take a trip in the Wayback Machine to determine if anything has changed. We will also take a fine-tooth comb to movies and music from the past and present to tease out how they portray single womanhood. I'm always learning on this journey, so as I encounter new info and points of view from other people, books, and podcasts, I will share with you. Many of our hopes and dreams do not have to be held hostage by us or our marital status. Whatever stage of life you're in, you are not too old and it is not too late. As long as you're living, there are still adventures to be had. No need to wait for somebody to come alongside you to say, I will do it for you or do it with you. You can just do it, and you may be surprised to meet supporters along the way. This woman is your seasoned sis, and she is inviting you along for her journey, your journey, our journey. Later, girlies.